Hello, it's Jeff the Rain Man Braddock here to alert you about the latest patch for Battlefield 5 that starts the Trial by Fire Chapter 3 of our live service buzzword, which comes after the Tides of War Chapter 2 because 3 comes after 2. Even though Firestorm doesn't come out until Monday the 25th, we've been slacking on our every 2 weeks update cadence since our last update was Tuesday, March 5th, 16 days or 2 weeks and 2 days before this one. With this patch, we overhauled flying planes because, much like Boeing with the 737 MAX 8s, we thought that being a pilot was too easy, which made dogfights with two skilled pilots very undynamic. We ran the flight trajectories through our simulations, all of which I did in my head, of course, no computers, and found that we needed to make lots of adjustments with both maneuverability and speed. The flap scaling has been adjusted to give less mobility at slower speeds, and the drag coefficient at less than 90 degrees, which is a right angle, and allows us to use the Pythagorean theorem to remove floatiness. Even though the ragdolls of battlefield physics sometimes contradict Newtonian laws, gravity now affects planes more when climbing, so if you go fast, you also need to be high, kinda like drugs. They're bad. In non-flight updates, there were nerfs to the GR-21 rockets with a smaller blast radius and 4,000-pound blockbuster bombs with slower movement and a damage reduction, but the same blast radius. Boom. Planes aren't the only vehicles in our game, there are also tanks. After having 2 weeks and 2 days of tanks running up in your spawn before the match starts, because while you couldn't go forwards during the already drawn out pre-round period where everyone reenacts the classic World War II tradition of repeatedly teabagging, going in reverse actually did work, bringing a whole new meaning to the term base raping. We patched that bug as well as many other bugs with passengers of those vehicles like not being able to fire rocket launchers or throwing grenades or getting out of a vehicle and being crushed by something that's getting towed behind it, things that definitely needed to be fixed for Firestorm or anything like that. Explosives deal blast damage, but in the case of the S-Mine, which has been annoying to the infantry players due to the fact that 3 of the 4 kits in this game can equip these set and forget Bettys, we've nerfed them to not be a one-hit kill, thus making those assignments equivalent in annoyance. The Piat also had its damage indirectly nerfed with our tank buffs from the previous patch, so we had to buff it slightly so that it's actually better against infantry than previously. For the anti-tank mine and dynamite, we've added a parabolic damage curve out to the edge in order to use quadratic equations. I mean, in order to have people that can actually put things in their correct place, because everything has a place, get rewarded without feeling like assault players are just people on the wrong side of the Israeli-Palestine wall by just throwing shit over and killing people on the other side of fortifications. We buffed the recoil on the FG-42 by a 0.02 reduction that should be only noticeable in the hands and minds of people like myself, and nerfed the recoil on semi-auto rifles, making them more difficult to use as they need longer to reset between each shot because there is no reason to use these self-loading rifles beforehand when you could just use ones with bigger clips and better gadgets. In other changes, we have added an option for whether people want to hold a button or just press a button for requesting a revive and skipping out the bleed stage. Clearly, the optimal option is just a button press after running both of these choices through my brain algorithm. There is also a new custom map rotation, which isn't new as much as bringing an existing mode Conquest to Hamada and not the spawn trap mode that we've secretly named Conquest Assault to the map. But the server is called Bombastic Fantastic, that rhymes, with a conquest on the aforementioned Hamada and Arras, along with Breakthrough on Twisted Steel and Panzerstorm to funnel people into the only good experiences in our game, which is sad for the state of Battlefield 5. Speaking of the state of our game, we also just released our roadmap for the next several months, which is something that all gaming companies do nowadays when the initial offering disappoints because it's a husk of a vessel for future considerations. For the rest of Chapter 3, up through June, includes 6 new weapons included in the weekly rewards, and of course, some of these weapons have already been data mined and/or are from our previous game, so they're not actually all that new. Also, not new is a game mode called Grind that's basically a faster paced Conquest Small in April, along with 2 new co-op missions, which you have all been highly clamoring for on Reddit and YouTube. On Fiel 652, which also has already been data mined, called High Intelligence, where you need to acquire documents, and Death from Above, an extraction mission, as well as a hardcore mode for all missions that is still somehow missing from the normal multiplayer, but we'll put it in co-op instead. I won't officially comment on leaks, but the other 3 maps' missions are in the description if you want to be in the know for the mode that still doesn't have matchmaking, although that is also in the files in order to make it a complete mode. In May, 6 months after our already delayed launch date, we are finally going to give you a second brand new map called Mercury that doesn't take place on the planet that's closest to the sun, but instead in Greece, which everyone thought would be coming in March, but turns out that our map release cadence is much slower now that you're not giving EA any money in the form of premium. Who would have thought? Also in May is a new mode, and again, it's not really new, it's just a neutered version of Breakthrough with only 1 sector that's more heavily fortified on defense. Then in June is a new mode called Outpost with the description, quote, "You'll secure and build objectives to ensure your team assembles enough soldiers to endure through the fight." That is basically saying nothing despite being an entire typed sentence. Chapter 4, Defying the Odds, starts in June, and based on how Chapter 3 started near the end of March after spring, you can guess that this will be during the summer equinox when the Earth is actually the furthest away from the sun, which is kind of strange because it's summer. We will have a second Greece map called Marita, which will then probably bring the first entirely new grand operation because we just threw Panzerstorm together with the map that most closely resembled it in visuals, Arras. There will also be a second map that we are not going to disclose, but it's also not going to be new, one from a previous game based on our description of the urban experience that Battlefield veterans will enjoy. Lastly, in Chapter 4, there will be a new mode, Up Close and Personal, with new maps for said mode, similar to what Respawn did for Live Fire in Titanfall 2 as a way to make brand new maps for free, but have them scaled down in order to do less work for the same credit. Lastly, in the fall of 2019 is Chapter 5, Awakening the Giant, which is a brand new theater of war. And based on the name, it'll be the United States, because it's based on the quote from the Japanese admiral after Pearl Harbor was bombed that they were awakening a sleeping giant, along with the description land, air, and sea invasion. Other than the Russians, they're the biggest faction that hasn't been represented in our game, even though we have maps set in France without French, or Norway without any Scandinavians. Oh, and even though there were Reddit posts about rental server programs, Boins, the real money currency, and microtransactions, there are still no concrete updates. But I don't know what you expect from us other than soon, trademarked. This is what happens when we hide behind the live service buzzword as an excuse to give you an empty shell of a game that we promise to fill but never actually get around to doing so.